Survivor Teek Part 2, Contender analysis for Episode 7. Cowboy Teek still going strong. So the merge episode is always a really important episode. We've seen a lot of stories come from pre-merge, but now we see how all the players bond together. It's a lot easier to see the relative edit between each specific player. It's not just thinking about the tribes, which tribe has more complex, which tribe has more drama. We can see everyone bonded together. Everyone's doing confessionals for every situation on the island. So let's see which ones make the cut and see whose confessionals are essentially the ones that are holding the most weight. And so the merge episode is always seen as probably the second most important episode other than the premiere episode to really analyze who the true contenders are. Which storylines from the premiere to the merge are continuing over into the post-merge? Who has a coherent storyline? When you look at the greatly edited Survivor winners, you can imagine a very coherent, clear storyline, whether it's overcoming odds, always being dominant, being somebody who survives in challenges, somebody with a solid alliance of 2 or 3. And typically with Survivor winners, they provide a bit of a strategic and social and physical strengths across the board because they want the winners to look like all-rounded players. And so with that in mind, that's how we're going to look at this. First off, Sydney. Sydney was ranked highly for me for most of the season. I had her actually at number 3, and a lot of that was based on potential. I think Sydney didn't have any real clear marks against her edit, but the edit makes sense at the end of the day. She didn't build great bonds with the blue, and the people in the middle were Erica, Nasir, Heather. We saw on the secret team that Heather wanted to target Sydney because of her dream. We saw that Nasir felt snaked to the whole double agent situation. And then we saw that Erica was trying to target Sydney because Sydney's too reactive and everything else. We also saw in post-exit interviews that Sydney got along well with Tiffany, Evvie, and Xander, but the edit we got was that she had that little fight with Tiffany, which showed that this was when they were, when Brad had to steal a vote, and Tiffany and Sydney were both chose to get the tarp instead. And so in that specific situation, we saw that they were, arguing a bit against each other. And Tiffany should have got the stolen vote. Imagine if she got the stolen vote, or Sydney, one of the two. If Sydney got the stolen vote, and then she kept that secret the entire time and then used this merge episode, it would have been epic. She would have been able to steal a vote, get Deshawn out. It would have been so fun. So Sydney kind of wasn't the strongest player. We got some content from her. I think we wanted it to be like a pretty big merge boot, but in retrospect, the story never really developed. And so I'm looking for people with more developed stories at this point and not potential. So without further ado, I think the coronation for Queen Tiffany continues. She's still at the top of the list. And we got no confessionals from Tiffany in this merge episode, but we got a lot of good secondary content from her. The entire Yase 3 has been seen to be kind of the more heroic trio. We didn't get them having some weird kind of like evil plan in place. It was a really heroic plan to be able to survive, and they all trust each other now, and we understand the relationships between the three of them. Liana's betrayal seemed like a really big move. Liana was made to seem dumb. Shan was made to be seen dumb. They were seen to be really smart with this incredible play. We got Xander's catchphrase. We got this flashback. And Tiffany was part of the plan. And even at Tribal Council, when Tiffany asked, what do you want me to do with your idol because it's yours? It shows that Tiffany is loyal. Tiffany's not Shan. Tiffany's not Shan where Shan gets the advantage and then it's hers and she doesn't want to give it back. Tiffany is, I want to play. Here's the idol back. And I think we're starting to see this real distinction between Tiffany and Shan. Final 2 maybe. I think so. But we're seeing how they navigate advantages. And they're both playing the advantage game. Tiffany ran this full story about not understanding the advantages at all to the literal advantage that she didn't understand at all at the start. Now she's the mastermind of the operation. She's the one with it in her pocket, and she's the one to create a lot of strife when there's counter advantages in place. And she thinks about playing the idol. She chooses to hold it back, correctly. She has the additional vote. She chooses not to play it correctly because Sydney, who was probably a loose wheel in their foursome, who just came out last minute, is gone. Who cares? Sydney kind of wasn't good for anybody. Looks good for Tiffany moving forwards. The Yase 3 overall gets a huge edit bump. They were the ones who said, let's get rid of Sydney, Deshawn, or Danny. They want to weaken that alliance of 3. They were the only ones that were correct. Everyone else was trying to target Evvie, which didn't work. That's a big knock for everybody in the edit rankings. So Tiffany didn't get a confessional, but her storyline continues. The underdog who's picking up the game quick. And so she's still there at number 1. I don't see any marks against her edit. We're going to have to see a nice, good rebound episode from her, like taking a bit more of the reins of the strategy of the Yase 3. I want to see a bit less of Xander and Evvie, a bit more of Tiffany as a bit more of the strategic or social force, bringing other people into the alliance to be able to survive. And if we start seeing that, this is ball game for Tiffany. I already think it's ball game, but that's going to be out of the park ball game. Number 2 is a bump up. It's Evvie. Evvie has always had the super strategic kind of edit. She's kind of in charge of that entire Yase 3. She's been seen to be kind of the glue, and people said that straight up this episode. The glue between Tiffany and Xander, and that's really important. The other thing, too, we saw from her were tears. We saw Evvie cry. She was vulnerable for the first time in this entire game. She's gone from power to absolute weakness. We saw her vulnerable in tribal council, upset, telling Xander, you should have used that on me. We messed this up. We're starting to see more than the strategic game bot Evvie. We're seeing Evvie playing this game with heart. She wants to make the merge. We're starting to really feel for her. We don't have the best sense of her personal life. I'm sure she has a really interesting creative personal life with her PhD, and she's also, from a minority sexuality, and so there's a lot to be said about Evvie that I think the show can explore more. But we're starting to get the emotion from her, which is what I wanted to see, as she has a really strategic edit, and she's been seen as a hero. She's been saved, and people who get saved and have an edit for their save, and this was a really well edited episode, I think it's going to go a long way. Evvie also had the most confessionals that merge episode. She had a lot of confessionals in premiere episode, and so if you're just taking a classical approach from premiere and merge, and who's getting the most airtime, who do we care about in these important episodes, it's Evvie. So Evvie's leaped over, and she's a number 2 and a strong number 2. If Tiffany falters, I'm putting Evvie up to number 1. I think Evvie has a really good chance of winning this game based on the edit. Number 3 is Shan. Shan had no confessionals this episode. Shan was kind of out of the strategy. The strategy on her side, for me, I think in reality it was good. Deshawn was able to rally the people, but she's being seen as a bit of a back force in that strategy. Deshawn and Danny are seen as like the real core of kind of that majority alliance. Shan was kind of in the dark. We got this one moment from her when Liana misplays the idol, and then Shan says, no, Evvie has the idol. Evvie has it, which is partly correct. This idol exists, but it's in Tiffany's pocket. Not much more from Shan. Shan's being a bit protected, and this is part of it. We were made to see Liana look dumb, but Shan and Liana were thick as thieves. We saw Shan talking to Liana on the beach saying, you gotta make the big move, you have to have blood on your hands. So we kind of saw Shan push Liana into the fray, which is probably good for her. But we're getting some protection because I think Shan was probably more involved in this entire strategy and was probably silently encouraging Liana to do what she did. But she's protected and didn't get much of an edit from her. The Shan-Ricard relationship, which has been so complex and so interesting, has been basically dead this entire episode. I think we wanted to see that. I think even if they fabricated some type of suspense between Shan and Ricard, and that Shan was able to keep Ricard on her team, would have been very strong for the edit for her. We're starting to see real weaknesses in Shan's edit, and this isn't just like somebody who was never really been fully a support of Shan. We're not seeing it. Let's see how Shan can pick up her game after that missed move by the Majority Alliance, and if she's able to keep the Majority Alliance intact. I don't think that's going to be the case, but Shan's there at number 3 just by default by having such a good pre-merge. She can slip further down if she continues to have a bad post-merge. 4 is Xander. This is a big jump up for Xander. I was on the periphery, and I think this episode in a lot of ways justifies Xander's edit earlier. I kept talking about Xander's weak edit because of the fact that they weren't showing this like overcoming this woman's alliance and like, finding every single move that he can to survive and having a heroic edit and winning these challenges. Because at the end of the day, Xander is aligned with 2 of the people who we thought that he was against. And so we got more of this kind of quiet edit from Xander where it looked like he was bonding with Evvie. We had a whole scene, which I think was a really important scene in this season, about Xander and Tiffany's. Like Tiffany's kind of like the delinquent kid thing, and Xander's like, Tiffany kind of likes the delinquent kid, and I'm just being one of them. I'm sorry, I made a boo-boo. And so I think that's part of it for Xander. And he had the moment of the season so far in terms of that advantage play, knocking out one of the most overpowered advantages we've seen in Survivor history, keeping the idol intact, keeping his hidden vote intact, and keeping his strong alliances. It's a ballsy move, especially when he had protection as well, to protect Evvie, and I think that's going to show a lot of strength of character, and it might be something that Nasir or maybe even Danny or Deshawn might respect down the line as well. And so we're starting to see that play out. Xander is a player whose name you're going to remember at the end of the season, and just for that, he's moving up in the rankings. We don't have that complete story from Xander, but if we get a little bit more content from him, a little bit more backstory, a little bit more emotion, I can start to see him moving higher, especially if Shan continues to have a weaker edit. Below these four, I really think it's tough. I think it's a Yase 3 or Shan wins the game. Shan based on pre-merge edit, Yase 3 based on this merge episode. It'd be very disappointing if we saw somebody not from the Yase 3 end up winning the game and in this beautiful narrative of being on the outs and having this kind of trio strategy to survive, but we'll see what happens. Number 5 is Deshawn. I think this is twofold why he's up here. Sydney's gone, who was the voice of Blue. Now we know Deshawn was the dominant force in Luvu. He was seen as a strategic core. He was targeted. He has a survival story now, and he was able to basically rally a lot of troops in defense of them. We got his context a lot from the edit this episode. We also got some interesting random content from him about how this is the nature of the game after the hourglass twist where Danny was being a little bit grumpy about it and Deshawn just said we have to roll with the punches. It was a little bit transparent pandering to the theme of the season, but any player that can get some good content in that connects them to the theme of the season is great. Deshawn's up there. We understand Deshawn's alliance is a little bit better. Now we kind of get some context why they maybe didn't show the Deshawn-Sydney relationship so much because he was so willing to discard her this episode. I need to see more of Deshawn Nasir, Deshawn Erica, Deshawn Heather. I need to see Deshawn's one-on-one relationships more to understand how his game is evolving for him to be a contender. And this has been a weakness across the Luvu tribe. We don't understand those one-on-one relationships the same way we understand with Ua and with Yase. So we need to see Deshawn really build that up, and we need to start to see the majority alliance in the perspective of Deshawn, and then he could go up higher. But it's still a mixed edit for Deshawn. He's 5, but I'm not feeling great about him. Below Deshawn, I don't think any of these guys stand a chance. Ricard's at 6. Ricard's at 6 because he's still seen as strategic. He's still seen as an important part of the Shan storyline. We know he has strategic chops. We heard nothing from him, so it's a slip from 5 to 6. Nasir's at 7. We didn't hear from Nasir either. Nasir was such a pivotal swing vote. I think we would have heard from him or something from his perspective, because if he is the winner, this was a vote where it's really important to understand why he chose the majority alliance over the minority alliance, because he seemed to be one of the people in the middle ground. We didn't hear from him. He survived. I thought he was going to get voted out. I think he might come up soon, even though I love Nasir. He has his idol. I need to hear about his idol. I need to hear about how he's going to use it. We need to hear from that from him. He's at 7. Liana's at 8. We got a lot of Liana content this episode. It's all negative. She misplayed her advantage. She's been talking about making this big move against Xander. I want to make a big move. Her big move failed. She was seen to be completely untrustworthy to the other 3. Xander was trying to throw her under the bus to Danny. She didn't really seem to have a great defense. She seems to be trusting Shan too much, and Shan's been kind of painted as someone not to trust. So I think Liana's edited for a downfall edit. It's not a winner's edit. It's 8, even though she's pretty highly visible. 9 is Erica. Erica's not going to win this season. We only got content from her from this hourglass twist, which is, at the end of the day, kind of irrelevant to the main storylines. Like, it impacted some of the current turbulence and drama. And I think, but for the hourglass twist, we wouldn't have seen Sydney go. But why did Erica vote for the majority? Like, what's Erica's feelings about voting for Luvu? Like, why isn't Erica supporting the minorities? How does she integrate herself back in? There's so many questions about Erica that ought to have been answered if she's the winner that weren't answered. 10 is Danny. We didn't get any confessionals from Danny. Danny was seen to be grumpy over this whole vote. Danny grumpy with the whole hourglass twist. We didn't get his perspective really about how the voting would go down. We got this more from Deshawn's perspective. When you see Danny take a little bit more control over the majority alliance's strategy for him to be seen as a winner, he's a completely secondary character this season. Heather, invisible character this season. She's 11. And yeah, so that's it. I don't see a ton of movement. I could see some movement in the Tiffany, Shan, Evvie. If anybody else is the winners, it's going to be a really weird season. Those three have viable winner edits at this stage. People online are saying nobody has a viable winner. They're ridiculous. Don't listen to the educators online. Listen to Teek. Listen to Survivor Teek's Contender analysis, because I know what's good. I've been saying Tiffany since day dot. I've got receipts. I've got timestamps. I've been saying her since day dot. So all these people are coming around talking about Tiffany being the winner, how she had a weak episode 2. Her episode 2 was great. Listen to my episode 2 analysis about why I thought Tiffany had a good episode 2. And it's showing it. She protected Xander, and Xander protected the Alliance. Like, let's understand exactly how things are going in retrospect. So Tiffany is still number 1. I like Tiffany. I want to see more of Tiffany. I'm starting to even come around as, like, for cheering for her too, not just from an Edgic analysis. So I'm excited to see how she's able to navigate, especially as a weaker physical player, and to see how it moves forwards for her. If she's able to build some bonds with Nasir or Shan or Ricard or somebody, gonna be huge for her. If she can bring in some social connections to that minority alliance, winner. She's the winner if she's able to do that in the next episode. So let's see if that happens. Cheers, everybody. Survivor Teek is out.